The Colosseum is more than a ruin. It is Rome's most enduring confession, a monument to ambition, violence, and the strange human need to turn both into spectacle. It has survived earthquakes, wars, looting, and centuries of neglect. But to understand what it truly is, you have to go back to the moment before it existed. Back to the fire that made it possible. In 64 AD, Rome burned. For 6 days and 7 nights, a catastrophic fire tore through the city. 10 of Rome's 14 districts were consumed. Homes, temples, markets, libraries, gone. Even the public grain stores were lost, threatening the capital with famine. It was the worst disaster in the city's living memory, and at the center of the story stood Nero. The emperor had long since lost the confidence of the Senate, and now the people turned on him too. The historian Tacitus later wrote that Nero watched the city burn from a tower, playing the lyre. Modern scholars doubt the scene was quite so theatrical. But what came after the fire was, in many ways, worse. While Rome lay in ruins, Nero saw opportunity. On the rubble of the destroyed city, he ordered the construction of the Domus Aurea, the Golden House. It was not a palace. It was a private empire within the empire, gilded halls, artificial grottos, fountains and gardens stretching across hundreds of acres. At its heart, a man-made lake, and overlooking all of it, a bronze statue of Nero himself, over 30 meters tall, depicting him as Invictus, the unconquerable sun god. The message was unmistakable. Rome existed for Nero. History disagreed. In 68 AD, the Senate declared him a public enemy. He fled the city and took his own life. What followed was chaos. A civil war so violent that 69 AD would be remembered as the year of the 4 emperors. When the dust finally settled, one man stood at the top, Vespasian. Vespasian was a general, not a showman. But he understood power. And he understood that power, after years of civil war, required more than military victory. It required legitimacy. It required the people. His solution was audacious. He ordered Nero's Domus Aurea partially demolished, the man-made lake at its center drained. And in its place, on ground that had been stolen from the Roman people by a tyrant, he would build something for everyone. A public amphitheater, the largest the world had ever seen. The symbolism was devastating in its precision. The center of Rome, once a private pleasure ground for one man, would become the beating heart of Roman civic life. The Flavian Amphitheater, named after Vespasian's dynasty, would not glorify an emperor. It would glorify the city itself. This was not generosity. It was genius. Vespasian knew that entertainment was governance. Juvenal, writing a generation later, would name the formula bluntly: panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Keep the people fed and entertained, and they will not question who holds the knife. Vespasian died before the building was finished. His son Titus inaugurated it in 80 AD, with 100 days of games. Over 9,000 animals were slaughtered in that single inaugural run. When Titus himself died 2 years later, his brother Domitian took the throne and pushed the project further still, expanding the underground hypogeum, refining the arena's mechanisms, and cementing the bond between imperial power and public spectacle. The machine was complete. Before any of this could happen, Rome had an engineering problem: the lake. Draining an artificial body of water in the heart of a city, then building on its waterlogged foundation, would be a serious challenge today. 2,000 years ago, it was extraordinary. Roman engineers excavated down to bedrock, channeled the water away with engineered precision, and prepared the ground to carry one of the heaviest structures ever built in the ancient world. The exterior walls were clad in travertine limestone, pale, durable, and relatively light. Quarried near Tivoli and transported dozens of kilometers by cart. The blocks were cut to standardized sizes and joined with iron staples and a lime pozzolan mortar. Inside, Roman engineers used a combination of brick, volcanic tuff, and their most closely guarded secret, opus caementicium, Roman concrete. A formula so resilient that modern engineers still struggle to fully replicate it. The structural ingenuity was in the arches, Semicircular vaults distributed weight laterally along curved lines, eliminating the need for solid interior columns. This freed up space, allowed simultaneous construction across multiple sections, and created the airy, interlocking galleries that still stand today. Thousands of workers, slaves, freedmen, craftsmen, architects, worked in parallel. Wooden cranes lifted stone. Fine tools shaped. Rope scaffolding climbed the rising walls. And yet, by the time Titus called for the inaugural games, the entire structure had been built in roughly 8 years. In modern construction, that would be impressive. For ancient Rome, building a 50-meter-tall elliptical amphitheater capable of holding 70,000 people in 8 years was practically supernatural. Walk through one of the 80 exterior arches of the Colosseum and imagine what it felt like. 50,000 voices. The smell of hot sand and animal blood cut through with clouds of incense. Myrrh and nard, imported from across the empire, piped in to mask the inevitable stench. Musicians stationed around the arena, playing horns, drums, and flutes, their rhythms calibrated to build tension, announce entrances, and mark deaths. And rising around you, tier after tier of stone, every seat occupied, every face turned toward the center. The arena floor itself was a stage, wooden planks covered with fine sand. Arena in Latin, the word that gave us arena, absorbed the blood between acts. Below that floor, invisible to the crowd, lay the hypogeum, a labyrinth of tunnels, cages, elevators, and pulleys. Wild animals, gladiators, and entire scenic constructions could be lifted from the darkness and made to appear in the center of the arena as if conjured from nothing. The effect, the first time you saw it, must have been terrifying. Seating in the Colosseum was not random. It was Rome's social hierarchy made permanent in stone. Senators sat closest to the sand. Above them, the equestrian class, then ordinary citizens, then freedmen. At the very top, furthest from the action, women and the poor. Simply by attending the same event, every Roman was shown, with architectural clarity, exactly where they stood. Circulation was handled by the vomitoria, a system of arched corridors and staggered exits that allowed tens of thousands of people to enter and empty the building in minutes. The same engineering principle governs modern stadium design today. At the top of the structure, sailors from the imperial fleet at Misenum operated the velarium. An enormous retractable awning made from heavy canvas and rigging rope stretched over the upper tiers like the sail of a warship. It filtered the sun. It cast atmospheric shadows across the sand, and it reminded everyone present that Roman engineering reached from the streets of the city to the surface of the sea. The games followed a prescribed order, and every moment of it was theater. Mornings opened with the Venetians, staged hunts in which professional hunters called venators faced wild animals from across the empire, lions from North Africa, tigers from Parthia, bears from Germania, elephants, crocodiles, rhinoceroses. Moving these creatures to Rome was a logistical operation that spanned continents. Reinforced ships, specialized cages, soldiers as escorts, all to ensure that the spectacle of imperial reach arrived breathing. After the hunts came the executions. But death in the Colosseum was never simple. Condemned criminals were often dressed as figures from mythology. One man made to play Orpheus before being torn apart by animals. Another cast as Prometheus, chained while a trained eagle tore at him. Punishment and theater fused into a single act of imperial pedagogy. The message: disobedience leads to this. Then came the gladiators. Not all of them were slaves. Some were volunteers. Men who signed contracts with gladiatorial schools for money, status, or the chance at reinvention. They trained under military discipline, ate controlled diets, and received medical care that would be sophisticated by the standards of the age. Each fighter belonged to a specific category with distinct weapons and tactics. The Mamillo, broad shield and short sword, the Retiarius, trident and net, trying to ensnare the heavily armored Secutor. The Thrax, curved blade and small shield. Fights were real. But they were not always lethal, popular, or valuable fighters were often spared. Their fate decided by the crowd's reaction, and sometimes by the emperor himself, reading the mood of 70,000 people and rendering judgment from the imperial box. What the movies show, a turned-down thumb meaning death, is not confirmed by any scholarly consensus. We do not actually know what gesture sealed a man's fate. That uncertainty makes it more unsettling, not less. Here is a detail almost no one knows. The word Colosseum appears in no inscription from the building's own era. To the Romans of the 1st century, the structure was the Amphitheatrum Flavium, the Flavian Amphitheater. That was its name, its identity, its political statement. The name we use today came from a statue. Standing near the amphitheater's entrance was the Colossus of Nero. That original bronze behemoth, over 30 meters tall, which Nero had erected as a monument to himself. Vespasian, practical as ever, chose not to destroy it. Instead, he had it rededicated to the sun god and its features slightly altered. The memory of the tyrant was technically erased, but the people kept calling it the Colossus. And over generations, the massive building next door became known as the Amphitheater of the Colossus, the Colosseum. The English monk Bede, writing in the 7th century, recorded the phrase that would echo through history: as long as the Colosseum stands, Rome will stand. When the Colosseum falls, Rome will fall. And when Rome falls, the world will end. The statue is gone now. Melted down sometime in the Middle Ages, its bronze repurposed. But its name survived, attached to the stone that outlasted everything else. When the Western Roman Empire collapsed in 476 AD, the Colosseum had already been changing for decades. Gladiatorial games had been banned around 404 AD under Emperor Honorius, under mounting pressure from the Christian Church. Without the spectacle, the function dissolved. What followed was centuries of repurposing. Noble families converted the upper galleries into fortresses, the homeless sheltered in its corridors. Workshops and stables occupied its vaults. Stonemasons stripped its travertine to build churches and palaces. The iron staples holding the blocks together were pried out and melted down. Those scars are still visible in the stone today. In 1349, a major earthquake collapsed much of the southern facade. And yet, the Colosseum never fell entirely. In the 17th century, the Catholic Church declared it a site of Christian martyrdom, though historians question the historical basis for this designation, and banned further stone extraction. The first real preservation efforts had begun. In the 19th century, Italian national unification transformed the Colosseum from a ruin into a symbol. It became the physical proof of a civilization worth inheriting. Archaeological work began in earnest. The structure was reinforced. The story was being told again. Today, millions of people walk through those arches every year. The Colosseum is not intact. It is missing roughly 2/3 of its original stone. But it is standing. And that fact alone is the most remarkable thing about it. It was built to project the power of an empire that no longer exists. It has outlasted the religion that condemned it, the rulers who stripped it, the earthquakes that broke it. It was built for violence, repurposed for faith, ransacked for building material, and finally preserved as a relic of civilization itself. That is what stone remembers when people forget.